Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Carl Dockstader, and I'll be your host this evening from 7 to 8 p.m. I want to welcome you all to tonight's live and interactive telephone town hall discussion with St. Catharines Mayor Matt Cisco and Councillor and Budget Standing Committee Chair Carlos Garcia. Tonight, they'll be answering your questions about the city's 2024-2026 multi-year budget. Right now, we're calling you and thousands of your neighbors from across St. Catharines. It'll take a few minutes to connect with everyone, so as we are dialing out, let me take a moment to explain how a telephone town hall works. If you would like to ask the mayor or budget chair a question about the budget, just press star and 3 on your phone at any time. Currently, people from across the city are answering their phones and connecting to the discussion. Once someone answers their phone, they just stay on the line to join the discussion. If you would like to ask the mayor or Councillor Garcia a question, just press star and 3 on your phone. For those who missed the call, an answering machine message will be left with directions on how to provide your feedback. This telephone town hall technology enables us to reach out and talk with thousands of people from the comfort of their own homes. It's a great way for the mayor and council to stay connected and ensure residents have the opportunity to ask questions live and listen to the answers. For those of you just joining the call, welcome. This is a telephone town hall with Mayor Matt Cisco and Budget Committee Chair Councillor Carlos Garcia. They would like to answer your questions and gather feedback on the city's 2024-2026 multi-year budget. I see we still have some more phones to call, so as we wait for everyone to join, I'd like to welcome Mayor Cisco and Councillor Garcia to the call and ask what you're hoping to get out of tonight's discussion. Remember, if you would like to ask the mayor or budget chair a question, just press star and 3 on your phone.
Thanks, Carl, and hello to everyone on the call. This is Mayor Matt Cisco. I wanted to take a second to just say thank you for taking the time to join us on the telephone town hall tonight to discuss the 2024 to 2026 multi-year budget. I did also want to just take a moment to thank the staff that we have from our financial management services. We've got Zoya and Trish and Katya and Richie and Abe and Lucia and Christine all here with us to help answer your questions. Any that come in, if we're able to answer them tonight, we will. City Council always appreciates the public's input as it helps to guide our decision-making and provide direction about our city budget. The input makes sure that the budget reflects what services and programs the community thinks are important and lets us know where you think, where you think our resources should be focused. So to ask a question, as Carl said, just press star 3 on your phone and that'll put you in the queue. On November 22nd, just last week, staff presented the city's first multi-year operating budget, which does cover the years 2024 to 2026. The multi-year budget is important. It helps to support council and the implementation of a multi-year vision. It encourages a focus on achieving longer-term goals, something we've heard a lot from the community about what they want us to focus on. It provides for greater efficiencies, and it's a more predictable financial framework which promotes forward-looking analysis and evaluation that enhances our financial sustainability and makes us less vulnerable to the things that may happen in the world. More importantly, though, the multi-year budgeting provides taxpayers and residents with greater certainty regarding the direction of the city's services, finances, and tax levies in the longer term. City staff have spent quite some time preparing the proposed budget. It includes all of the major areas of city operations. So we can talk about planning and building, we can talk about bylaw enforcement, community recreation and culture services, economic development, fire services, engineering, facilities, and environmental services, as well as municipal works, which is snow plowing and road maintenance. This year, a very new process, what we call the strong mayor legislation. The budget is now presented by me. So it will be my budget that comes forward in January. The goal is that the budget we bring forward is affordable and it aligns with the feedback that we receive from the different public engagement opportunities over the next month. I know last night Councillor Garcia had a budget open house. He will host another budget open house tomorrow night. And so we also have a number of different opportunities in the community with public kiosks. So I encourage folks, if you still want to provide more feedback after tonight, hit engagestc.ca/budget. And I'll repeat that a couple times during the call tonight. But tonight we are doing the telephone town hall. This has been the best way for us to reach out to more people in our community. The telephone town hall allows us to talk to thousands of residents in their homes. And we appreciate everybody who stays on the line and who's engaging in the budget process. As a reminder, if you want to ask a question and participate live, you just press star 3 on your phone to get in the queue. And I'm going to turn things over now to our budget chair, Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Carl and Mr. Mayor. Councillor Carlos Garcia here, the chair of the city's Budget Standing Committee. And this is my first year doing this as the chair of the Standing Budget Committee, so I thank everyone for joining us. As the mayor alluded to earlier, under the new strong mayor legislation, and you're going to get tired of hearing about the strong mayor legislation, but it changes things. So, councilors are to provide Mayor Cisco with feedback prior to the mayor tabling his budget on January 3rd, 2024. I've now been a councilor for approximately 9 years, and I can tell you that the feedback from residents is very important to the mayor and to council, and it is particularly important to me as the new chair of the Budget Committee. In addition to this town hall tonight, as the mayor mentioned, there are a number of public engagement opportunities that will continue from now until December 15th. Tomorrow night, there will be another budget open house at the Kiwanis Aquatic Center, 6 to 7 p.m., and everyone is welcome to attend. And again, we held another one last night at the Seymour Hanna Center, known by people as the Forpat. Then from December 5th through the 15th, staff will have budget kiosks set up at various locations across the city for the public to visit and ask questions of staff and provide feedback. And they will be at prominent locations like the Penn Center, etc. For dates and locations and times, you can visit www.stcatharines.ca/budget. Here, you will also be able to learn more about the proposed budgets and fill out a public survey to collect community feedback. Once again, please visit www.stcatharines.ca/budget. And if you do want to look at the budget in detail, you can also access the budget via the city's website, stcatharines.ca, by looking at the agenda for the November 22nd meeting when staff presented it. In the meantime, if you would like to ask us a question, just press star and 3 on your phone at any time.
Thank you very much for that information. For those of you just joining us on the call, we're here tonight for a telephone town hall discussion with St. Catharines Mayor Matt Cisco and City Councilor Carlos Garcia. Tonight, you'll get a chance to ask your questions and share your thoughts about the city's budget in a real-time, interactive environment. If you have a question for Mayor Cisco or Councilor Garcia, press star 3 on your phone at any time. Looking at our systems, I can see that there are thousands of people joining on the line. There is still more to join the call, so before we officially begin, let me take a moment to ask a question of my own. You mentioned last week that the staff proposed budget was presented. Can you tell us more about what was presented and what it means to the public, Mayor Cisco?
Definitely. Thanks, Carl. The staff did propose our budgets last week. They show an increase over the next 3 years. 2024, the levy budget will have a 3.47 increase. 2025, a 3.85% increase, and then a 3.6% increase in 2026. So that means about $62.71 for the upcoming year. That'll be the difference in the city portion of the tax levy. And I think it's important to let people know we had a long conversations about taxes this year at St. Catharines Council. Under the guidance of Chair Garcia, we gave staff guidance that recognized what inflation was, but also recognized that we know affordability is top of mind in St. Catharines. And so I want to give kudos to staff. Their first draft of this budget that has come forward that they presented does fall within the guidance that we asked at the time. Right now, we're also waiting for Niagara Region to finish their tax levy budget for 2024. It's actually scheduled to be finished on December 14th. We changed our process this year to make sure that we were dealing with our budget after we knew what the budget implications were from the region. And the province, I should point out, the province has also not set their education rates for 2024. So it's all three bodies, the region, the province, and the city, that are responsible for the total tax bill that the city of St. Catharines sends out. And it's important to recognize tonight we're just talking about the tax bill that the city is able to actually change. So that's the city's legislative tax bill. Okay. Although services are staying the same in the proposed budget, there are a number of pressures that are important to identify so people understand what's going on with the tax levy. There are different rules from the province. A lot of rules have changed over the past year with respect to what we need to spend our dollars on. There's inflation, which I know everybody on the call is very aware of. the increased costs for fuel, for services, for materials, for utilities, contracts, software, and licenses, those all impact the city the same way they impact residents. We've got asset management requirements. When we talk about asset management, we're talking about the infrastructure in the city, the roads, the sewers, the sidewalks, the buildings, making sure that we're maintaining those buildings. There are labor market challenges, and this is something we've talked a lot about over the last year in office, is just how difficult it's been to be able to attract talented people like the ones we have here, to attract those folks to come and work for the City of St. Catharines. And this isn't just the City of St. Catharines issue. This is every level of government across the province of Ontario, in fact, across the country right now, with labor shortages causing a lot of challenges. There's also trying to manage downward pressures due to all the social issues. And I know there's a number of questions that we're looking at on the board right now with respect to the lack of affordable housing and the homelessness and the opioid epidemic. These are issues that are actually the purview, they're supposed to be dealt with by upper levels of government, the region and the province. But a lot of the downstream effects wind up being the cities to deal with. And so some of the cost pressures that we experience are as a result of other levels of government not spending the dollars they need to spend. And we will address that during some of the questions tonight, I'm sure. And then finally, the city has evolved. It's a more diverse, inclusive employer and in a more diverse, inclusive community. And that does place some pressures on the city budget. But again, under the new Strong Mayor legislation, this is what staff proposed. So what came forward on the 22nd and what we're going to be conversing about is what staff has proposed. On January 3rd, I will be presenting the final budget. And I hope everyone on the call will help guide me. If you have ideas tonight, please jump on, hit *3, and provide those ideas so that I can look at ways to incorporate them into the budget. Councillor Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could add, as the Mayor has stated, Council has heard loud and clear that affordability is top of mind for our residents, and it is certainly top of mind for me. Myself, with the support of Council colleagues, previously passed a motion asking staff to provide an alternative budget under the guidance of a 0% increase over 2023. So again, to make it clear, the Mayor mentioned that the budgets that came in around 3 to 4% are within the initial guidance that we gave staff, and then we passed a motion to ask staff for an alternative at 0%, just to see what would have to happen to get to 0%. So some of the things that would need to be discussed if a 0% budget was the goal included, based on the feedback from staff with the budget, closing or reduce hours at some city facilities, removing and or reducing some city programming and services, discontinuing some of the grants and funding the city currently provides, and last but not least, increased efficiency in providing the services that the city does provide. With inflation, as the Mayor mentioned, and its negative impact on families, these are things that Council needs to consider, but not without hearing from our residents first.
Thanks for that information. The budget process is challenging for the city, and it sounds like Council has some tough decisions ahead of them. For those of you just joining, welcome to St. Catharines Telephone Town Hall on the city budget. If you have a question this evening, just press *3 on your phone at any point. Let's go to the queue and answer some questions. Our first question is from Madeline, who has a question about homelessness. Madeline, what is your question?
My question is, are you willing or able to put more money towards social workers in schools for our children so that homelessness and drugs aren't an option, or not an option, but their first option to go towards?
Madeline, thanks for that question. And this is something that we encounter a lot. I'm going to start, and I think it's important for people to understand the two levels of government. We have a city and we have a regional level of government, and they have different responsibilities. And when it comes to issues surrounding homelessness and the funding for the programs for the homeless, affordable housing, that's a regional responsibility. With that said, there are a lot of costs that come about because of homelessness, because of the opioid epidemic, that fall to the city. I know last year we undertook an exercise to try and total up what the total cost to the city was of issues that aren't really within our mandate, but that was funding anyways. So I will say this year, directly, we spent $567,000 just on homelessness outreach. And that's to supplement a program that the region is spending money on, but that I would argue they need to be spending more on. Again, the City of St. Catharines isn't responsible for it, but we recognize that we have a homelessness problem in our community. We need to be doing the outreach. That number doesn't really go down over the next couple of years. And when we look at some of the indirect costs, the truth is we're spending anywhere from $2 to $3, maybe even creeping up closer to $4 million when it comes to cleaning up our parks, when it comes to cleaning up encampments, when it comes to dealing with the trails and dealing with the security issues that we have, and all the issues that come about because of these. So the city is going to continue to fund the homelessness outreach. I will say, from my perspective as the mayor, I will continue to work at the region to try and get more dollars put towards shelter space and affordable housing. We know that there's a 55-bed shelter being built on Riordan that should be coming in the next few months. There is a temporary short-term overnight shelter that's currently operating at Silver Spire. We know that shelter is a short-term Band-Aid solution, so that's why we're also pushing the region to spend more on affordable housing so that we can help transition people into full-time housing. But from the city's perspective, like I said, just this past year alone, we spent almost $570,000, and that number doesn't really come down, in addition to the other $2 or $3 million in indirect costs. So thank you for that.
All right, our next, or do you want to comment as well, Councilor Garcia?
I think the mayor has covered it well, Carl. I would only add, for the benefit of those who asked, the mayor mentioned shelters and encampments. We do get a lot of questions about that, and emphasize that there is legislation that we must follow. So we get questions about encampments as to whether they can be removed or moved somewhere else. And people need to understand that under existing legislation, we can only move somebody out of an encampment providing there is shelter space from them. Otherwise, we cannot do that. So that's all I would add at this time.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. We're going to go to a question from Hugo, who is asking about the municipal golf course. Hugo, you're on the line. You're live right now.
Hi, Mayor Cisco. Hi, Councillor Garcia. How are you? I'd like to ask about the municipal golf course. I understand that it might be turning a profit for the first time in quite a long time. I'm not 100% sure on that. But my question is whether it makes sense for the city to be operating this asset, whether at a loss or even at a small profit, when there are so many private sector golf options which are reasonably priced in Niagara, and if it wouldn't make more sense to sell this asset and realize a one-time gain from it by doing so.
Hugo, Councilor Garcia here. This is the difficult question because I hear what you're saying. On the other hand, we hear from many people who say, particularly seniors, I believe, and newcomers to the city that really enjoy that golf course and appreciate the fact that there is a golf course for those who are golfers who is more reasonable than a lot of the other private courses. In terms of the budget, we do spend a significant amount of money on it. We do not make money. In 2024, for example, there is $400,000 budgeted to essentially support the golf course over and above the revenue that they earn. But one of the things that we need to look at are additional revenue opportunities, and we had some questions about that last night. And I know, and at council, and I know our staff at Municipal Works, who is in charge of this, will be looking at ways that they might increase that revenue. So hopefully we can get close to break even. Thank you.
Perfect, Councilor Garcia. Thank you for the reply. We have a question from Amy, who's asking about accessible sidewalks. You're on the line, Amy. What's your question today?
Hi, thank you. When I talk sidewalks, I'm a wheelchair user, and I find there are a lot of sidewalks in the city that are not wheelchair friendly. The worst one that comes to mind, and I keep complaining about it, and nothing seems to change, is Queen Street by the post office. It's all bricks that have they lift up, and it becomes a very bumpy surface. Is there any effort to prioritize making these sidewalks more wheelchair friendly, in general friendly? I'm sure people with buggies and carts, I'm losing my words, baby strollers, that's what I'm trying to say. People with baby strollers as well, I'm sure, have noticed the sidewalks are really bumpy. Is there any effort to prioritize making those more friendly for use? And also, I'm hoping, because I keep complaining and I keep raising this issue in any of the committees I've been on. I'm hoping that this year with snow removal, it's been flagged as a priority to make sure that wheelchairs can use sidewalks, especially when it comes to crossing the street. Very often you get snowplows that come in, they build up the snow at the edge of the street where you can cross, and wheelchairs can't get through because we can't go over the pile of snow that's now at the end of the street. Those are my questions.
Amy, yeah, I appreciate those questions, and I think they're important ones that I appreciate the opportunity to address them here. First things first, sidewalk accessibility is actually a large part of our active transportation projects that we're currently ongoing across the city. In the upcoming year, in the capital budget, we've got $3.5 million identified just for sidewalks, and our sidewalk projects are all aimed at making the city more accessible. So we want to build out a sidewalk network that is easy to navigate for all users in the community, and that includes folks that are using accessibility devices, that are using strollers. We want to make sure that that's the case across the city. With respect to your question about snow clearing, I think that's an important one as well. I know we've had a lot of challenges over the last number of years. This council made a decision in this past budget, and we're going to continue to make the decision. We're funding our winter control at a higher level because we recognize that snow clearing in all aspects was problematic in previous years. Sidewalks is one of those areas. We know that we need to do a better job of getting the snow cleared so that people are able to get around the community. And that's vitally important for people that perhaps don't have cars and their only means of transportation is using accessibility devices. So I would say, rest assured, we are going to be keeping that top of mind. Active transportation has become a very high priority at the city over the last couple of years. That active transportation plan is important to us, so just know that is going to be a priority. And like I said, $3.5 million this year, that climbs next year to $3.8 million because we know that this is an area where we need to improve the quality of our sidewalks, including making them wider so that people are able to access them. So thank you for that.
And Mr. Mayor, and just to add, it's important to point out on snow clearing of sidewalks that residents are responsible for clearing the snow, and those that can't because of disability, or because of their seniors who cannot do it, there is a program whereby they can apply to the city to have the city clear their sidewalks. But very important to have those sidewalks clear by every property owner.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillor, for your answers. Thank you, Amy, for the question. Candace is on the line and has a question about empty houses. How are you doing today, Candace? What's your question?
Hi there. Thank you for taking the time to answer questions. So I'm just curious. There is a lot of properties, especially businesses, currently sitting empty. Is there a way to better utilize those spaces and maybe make them an area where homelessness could be addressed for shelter, and then that would therefore maybe generate more city or regional level jobs for social workers and other people?
So, Candace, that's a great question, and actually we were having a discussion about that in my office today. We introduced a vacant building registry last year, and it's been picking up steam was what I was trying to say, over the last year. I will start by saying I strongly encourage residents, if you have identified properties that are currently vacant that aren't being used, please call into the city and make us aware of them. because we recognize, and I go for walks, I talk to folks in the community. I was at the Westview Center for Women the other day, having a conversation with the ladies there, and they were identifying, on my street, there's 3 or 4 properties that we know are vacant, that nobody's living in them, they're not being used. Get those addresses to the city so that we're aware of them. It's not a good situation to be in where we know we have empty residential properties in the community and we have people that have nowhere to live. And so we're doing everything we can to incent people to make sure that those rental properties are rented and that people in the community are able to have somewhere to live. With that said, we are going to continue to look for opportunities to try and continue to encourage property owners to get those properties filled, whether they're commercial properties, whether they're residential properties, because we understand how important that is.
And Mr. Mayor, under the vacant properties bylaw that we passed, there are penalties for having a property vacant. So there is an encouragement for people who have a vacant property not to leave it vacant.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor. Next up, Peter has a comment as a homeowner. Peter, what are your thoughts this evening?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've been living here for 35 years now. When I moved to St. Catharines, I'm still in the same location. And over the years, I've become very impressed by the city management in general. I'm on my 3rd mayor now, and I've had very good cooperation from City Hall in certain matters. On occasion, I had to ask for help from one of the councillors representing my ward, and that was always a good effort. I was never brushed aside or ignored. And I think over the years, when I look at my property taxes, you're doing a fine job with your budget. And I thought I should comment you. You got a very fine organization, city management, from the mayor down to the councillors. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm impressed by what I've seen over the last 35 years.
Well, Peter, I'm going to tell you, we don't get calls like this very often. And so I just want to say thank you. You put a lot of smiles on people's faces in this room right now, so thank you for that. Councillor, I don't know.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Peter. And I'm glad to hear that your ward councillor, I don't know what ward you're in, does respond. I personally have a personal policy that I respond to all my calls and emails within 24 hours. And I think it's important because if you need to talk to the city and you want to talk to your councillor, you should be able to access your councillor.
All right, fantastic, Peter. Thank you. Thank you for that love for the city. Leo has a question about increases in taxes. How are you doing today, Leo? What's your question this evening?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I noticed on last year's tax bill that the regional tax rate went up 10%. And I'm just wondering what you see as a projection for the regional tax rate for the next 2 years. And is there something that can be done about it to curtail it somewhat?
So, Leo, I appreciate that question. I will say this year, right now, the proposed tax rate is in the 7+% range right now. Regional Council's got a lot of work to do, and that's been stated from the regional chair, the budget chair, all the way down. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. We've had some discussions, and I'm sure people will have seen the discussions in the local media, just talking about things like the police services budget, which Council sent back to the Police Services Board to identify where they could save money. Niagara Regional Transit, they've been asked to save money as well. But the levy budget is what's coming up. That'll be dealt with. We have a workshop tomorrow, and then the levy budget will be dealt with next week. And that's probably the area where Council is going to have the most to say and the most savings to identify. On the city side of things, and this is I appreciate this question because I think it provides a little bit of insight into the struggle that our council had this past year. This past year, we were passing our budget without knowing what the regional impact was going to be. And so we changed our timelines because we wanted to have a fuller picture of what the overall tax bill is going to look like. The reality is the city collects taxes on behalf of the region. So when we send out the tax bill, we get the questions here at City Hall, even though sometimes the questions would be better directed to the region because it's their budget that causes some of the increases. So this year we're phasing ours after. We should know what the regional increase is, and that will not be a secret when we are making our decisions in January. And I think that's a good thing. I think regional council has some more work to do, but as I said, everybody seems committed to bringing that tax increase down at the regional level. And so we're going to keep working at that to try and make sure that it's more in line with where the city is. We mentioned at the beginning, right now what staff presented last week was about a 3.7% increase. I can tell you the budget that I present in January is going to be lower than that. We've already identified some savings that I'll be putting into the budget. Councillor Garcia and I were having a great conversation just before the call began tonight about one of the ideas I've had that I think he's in favor of that will provide a little bit more relief on that tax bill from the city side. It's incumbent on folks like me and my regional council colleagues at the region to do the same thing with the regional budget because the reality is that taxpayer affordability has to be top of mind when we're going through this process this year, next year, and the year after, right through this term.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the opportunity to emphasize again, because I don't think everybody in the public understands. As you pointed out, our increase that we have so far that we hope to bring down is somewhere around 3.5%. But the tax bill that eventually goes to you as the property owner is a blended tax bill, which includes our increase, the region's increase, and the school boards. So that's why what you get is different from what we approve here. But I'm certainly at the budget committee doing everything possible to keep our increase down. And as the mayor said, and if you read in the paper, I know that regional council is trying hard to push back on some of the cost increases. So we're hoping that they come in with something a lot more reasonable than last year.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Leo, for the question. Next up on the line, we've got Sandra, who's asking a question about the old GM plant in The Hague. Sandra, what's your question for our Mayor and Councillor tonight? Sandra, you're live.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I live fairly close to the GM plant on Ontario Street. And I'm just wondering, what's in the making for the demolition, to be completed? I notice as walking by, I walk by there quite often, and I notice even the homeless go behind that wall that's still erected there on Ontario Street. And it could be very dangerous as well because it's not a safe place to be. So I'm just wondering, what's in the making in the future for that GM plant to be totally demolished?
So, Sandra, thanks for the question. That's one that I know Councillor Garcia and I get this question on a fairly regular basis. So the mortgage holder, who is the one who is doing all the work on that property, has been working diligently over the last year to try and get the environmental issues sorted out. And so it may have appeared that there was a bit of a pause going on the property, especially because the hoarding was put up, and so it's difficult to see, but there was actually a lot of activity. And it's a good news story to be able to say that they've dealt with the environmental concerns that have been raised. There's no more infiltration into the creek, so there's no contamination getting into the water supply. And that's something that, and I'll give a little bit of credit to my colleague, Councillor Garcia has been pushing this heavily at council over the last couple of years, along with former Councillor Porter, and myself and a number of other councillors. I don't think anybody should be able to take full credit for it. It's been everybody saying this needs to be dealt with. So we're now at the stage where we're actually undergoing the Ontario Street secondary plan. And that secondary plan is going to inform what that entire corridor, the GM property included, is going to look like. So as we go through that process, work continues at the site. I actually had an update from the folks over there a couple of days ago, just identifying the works that they're doing as they take part in the process as well with the secondary plan. But the ultimate goal is there is still some cleanup to be done. There is a demolition that is coming, and I can just let you know that is coming. It may not be, tomorrow. In fact, it definitely won't be tomorrow because we know about that if it was, but it is coming, and they are very keen to get that done as well, but they want to make sure that they're doing things in the proper order because, again, there are a lot of environmental contamination issues, and they want to make sure that what they're doing is clean, it's done by the book, and it's in the best interest of the community. But that is work that's ongoing, so rest assured. I was telling a joke earlier this year because there was a lot of hammering and digging that was going on there for a while, and we were getting a lot of complaints at City Hall, and I said, the complaints about the construction activity and the demolition activity are the complaints that I'm willing to handle in our office, because that means that something is actually happening. So as I said, rest assured, work is ongoing. It is getting better. It is going to take some time, though.
Yeah, and as far as the danger, we realize that is real if people break in or are using the area who are not supposed to. And I just encourage all the residents to be vigilant. I know I get calls from a couple of residents anytime that the contractor leaves the gate open or doesn't manage it properly so that people can get in and out or kids can get in and play, because it is not safe. It's a work area, and we need to keep it safe.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor, for the answers. Thank you, Sandra, for the question. John has a question about the increasing the tax base. John, you're live right now.
Okay, thank you. I don't think the city's ever going to get its citizens saying we want less services, and ultimately to mitigate the increases that we as residents are asked to bear. There's the opportunity. I guess I would like to understand what opportunities are there to increase the tax base so that the percentage increases year to year are kept in check.
So, great question with respect to increasing the tax base. I will say we have a number of different programs that are aimed at trying to attract new development, attract new assessment to the community. We have a number of grant programs under our CIP, and we have a very robust economic development department that is going out regularly and trying to identify opportunities, across I would say across the province, but it's farther afield than that, trying to look at bringing in new companies that are going to be able to add assessment value, bring in new residential developments that will add assessment value. We are starting to see the fruits of that labor. Everybody's aware, there's a high-rise building going in downtown St. Catharines. There are a number of others that are slated. Demolition work has begun in some cases. All of those things, and this is something I've really pushed over, the last couple of years, and was something we talked about a lot last year. If we bring in those, 11,000 units that the province is asking us to work on getting built in the community, that is going to have a very positive effect with respect to the assessment base, which is, how you keep downward pressure on taxes. You have to have some growth in your assessment base, and we're starting to see that that's happening. There are a couple of other technical issues going on at the province right now with respect to MPAC, which they need to sort out as well so that we can get the full advantage of those assessment increases. But please know, that is a driving concern of a couple of different departments at City Hall, is identifying new ways to bring in that taxation revenue through a broader base.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are increasing the residential tax base for sure, because particularly after the pandemic or during the pandemic, when people were looking at starting to work remote and moving out of the big cities, we had a lot of new residents. I'm sure the mayor found the same thing when we were running for election in 2022. I was impressed with how many people I met at the door that said they just moved here. And I'm talking about moving from anywhere from Stoney Creek, Hamilton, Toronto, Guelph, different places. So it's good to see that people elsewhere are recognizing the pleasure of living here and some of the amenities that we have and being close to the border and the services that we have. So that also increases the tax base.
Excellent. I want to point out that we're down to roughly our last 20 minutes. The town hall is going to end at 8 p.m. We still have lots of time, so if you have a question, press star and 3 on your phone right now. I'd also like to let everyone know that at the end of the call, you'll be able to leave a voice message. So if we don't get a chance to take your question live on the air, or if you aren't comfortable asking your question live, you can wait until the end of our telephone town hall and leave a message. Next up on the line, Eric has a question about single parents Eric, what's your question for us today?
Well, hi, gentlemen. How are you?
We're having a good evening, Eric.
There are lots of things that I would like to touch on, but I understand that other people want to put in their point of view. If you understand me?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, if you touch about homeless, I don't have a problem with it. Okay? Because I'm not that I don't have a problem with it, but because I don't homeless. All right?
Okay.
Along with my 2 children. Okay. I hear this lady who talk about the GM plant, which not far from me right now. And he was talking about demolition. My point of view also says when it comes to that, instead of demo the building, why not fix it so there's no car parts making there anymore? Why not just get the building together and put it into a room and safe place for the homeless people could be sheltering it more than demolish it, which is going to cost the city more to demolish it and to build it back to put it into affordable place that homeless people could shelter.
Okay, so Eric, I appreciate the comment, and that is something that was looked at when the property was originally purchased. Understand, and I think this is important, and sometimes we get into these conversations, it's important for people to recognize the city doesn't control private property. I mean, as much as there are times when we probably wish we could, legally we have no ability to dictate what people do on private property for the most part. There are some areas where we have legislative authority and we can go in and take care of some issues. When it comes to the GM plant, part of the problem is as soon as the city tries to go on and do any sort of work, take any sort of control, we would also wind up assuming some of the liability. And that's a very, very environmentally contaminated property. And so I always try to caution people. I don't think they want the city to get involved because that could lend us being open to very large dollar signs, big sums of money to do part of the cleanup. With respect to the idea to retrofit that building, it is an industrial plant. I will say it's been contaminated for a very long time. It wouldn't be safe to have people living there. And that's part of the issue with the site in general. The reason why it's taking so long, I mean, this is a site that over the course of 100 years was contaminated, through normal industrial processes that began at a time when we didn't really understand what the environmental damage would be. But it's taken 100 years to get the site to the stage that it was at. It's going to take some time for it to be cleaned up to a point where we can use it for things like residential redevelopment or commercial redevelopment. If it had been left as an industrial use, it could have been left in the state that it was, but then we wouldn't have had the opportunity to clean up the site. So I would just caution, when folks are looking at those private sites, just be very cautious because I don't think that's a path we want to go down where we're trying to dictate use on those privately owned sites.
Thanks for the answer there, Mayor. Ken has a question about infrastructure. Ken, what's your question for the Mayor and our councillor?
It seems to me that there's a lot of properties that have been torn down or whatever. We've talked about the GM property, but there's also the General Hospital property. There's property on Lakeshore Road that things have started, and there's been no time frame of when it's going to, start to happen. It's also downtown with the James Street property, the King Street property. There's a lot of properties that things could be happening on, and it doesn't seem like a lot of things are happening. So my question is, do you have any timeline on the structures that are going to be proposed for these areas?
Thank you for that question. It is a big question for us as well. And as the mayor pointed out, we do have a lot of projects on the go, but the big challenge is that the city can work on these projects with the builder or developer and go through their plans and approve building permits. But once the building permits are approved, we have no control over when they start them, other than the fact that the building permit has an expiration time, which, if memory serves me right, is about 5 years. So, for example, I can tell you that in my ward of Port Lucie, we have the Lincoln Fabrics project, which is called the Harbor Club, I believe, and people keep asking me, what's happening there? Nothing is happening. Well, they've had all the permits from the city for at least 2 to 3 years, and they still haven't started. Now, you will hear that people are concerned about interest rates being so high, and therefore they can't make as much money. And secondly, housing has slowed down, so the demand isn't there. But there are things happening, like on James Street, as you mentioned, that project, what I hear is, I assume you're talking about James Street right across from City Hall, is I understand they're going to break ground on that very shortly, and they managed to demolish that. And also the one on Carlisle, I'm sure everybody in the city can see that project is supposed to be about 19 stories, and they're almost up to the 19, if not there. So some things are moving, but other things are approved, and the owners are not proceeding, and we can't force them because they're private owners.
Thanks for that answer. Kathy has a question about development charges. Kathy, what's your question this evening?
Oh, yes, thank you. So you've spoken about increase in taxes, and you've also spoken about the asset management plan. At the same time, I know that, a drive is coming from the province, and the city is looking to expand and build more housing. And if you drive around, you see that developers are tearing up the infrastructure and yet not fixing it to the same condition or better that they found it in. Yet development charges, as I understand, have been removed for builders. So I guess my question is now the onus becomes on the taxpayer to fix the infrastructure, whether it be sewers, roads, sidewalks, etc. So in its 3-year plan, how is the city proposing to get the money back from the developers and hold the developers accountable to ensure that the infrastructure is left in good repair?
So, Kathy, I really appreciate that question. This is something that we've talked a fair amount about over the last year. Everybody's heard about the legislative changes that have come down from the province, Bill 23, Bill 109. I think it's important to provide some context to the St. Catharines specific situation because we're a little bit unique. We actually didn't charge development charges until 2022. We had a 13-year gap where we didn't charge development charges for specifically the reason that the province has been making changes to DCs because they felt that it might, and we had hoped that it might spur on new home construction. I'll be completely honest. In the 13 years that we didn't have DCs, it didn't really help. We didn't see any great spurring on of home building construction. However, the province has passed legislation. They've changed the way DCs are collected. This is definitely causing problems in municipal budgets. Here in St. Catharines, it's causing problems at our level. It's causing problems at the regional level, where we're recognizing projects and infrastructure that we would have funded with DCs in the past. We now don't have that as a revenue source. I will be blunt because I think it's important for people to understand the downstream effects of these changes by the province are that we will have to put those costs on the property tax bill. That's really the only option, and there's no mechanism right now in place. I will say we have had long conversations with the provincial government. We are working adamantly to find ways to be made whole, and that's the phrase we use, to be made whole for that missing revenue that should be coming from development charges, because at the end of the day, that infrastructure has to get built. In the past, the idea was that growth paid for growth. So the development that was going to be going in would have development charges tacked on to help pay for the cost of the infrastructure that was required to support that growth. With the changes that have been made, some of that is lost. So we are working with the province, with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I've had lots of conversations with Minister Calandra and with his staff, and we're going to continue having those conversations because at the end of the day, I don't think it's fair to put the cost of that infrastructure for new builds on the backs of the rest of the community. There are other infrastructure costs that the rest of the community has to bear, and adding this on top doesn't make life any more affordable in the community. That's just the reality.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we have a great question, as you said. We have heard from the ministry before that they do intend, I think that making us whole came originally from the ministry, that term, but this is a province-wide problem, obviously. It's not just in Catharines, in that other municipalities are going to be in the same situation. And if the province wants to get all this housing built, they're going to have to help us with that on other municipalities. And I know council has passed pretty strongly worded motions asking the provincial government to follow through and help us fund that infrastructure deficit that the development charges being removed causes.
Thanks for the great question, Kathy, and the great answers. Ian has a question about property tax rates. Ian, what's your question for the mayor and councilor tonight?
Good evening, folks. There's a real estate outfit by the name of Zoo Casa. They're national. On 3 occasions, they listed our tax rate as having the highest. Our property tax rate is the highest in Southern Ontario. And that has me confused because we don't get an awful lot of services here when you consider lack of snow removal, lack of maintenance in our park in Cambrian Heights. This is the case, and it was also announced on a Toronto radio station 2 years ago at Christmas time. If this is going to be the case, we will have serious implications for attracting investment in the future and unemployment. And that is my real concern for this community, is the ability to attract future investment, both industrial and residential. And boy, oh boy, that's going to have serious implications for the ability of this community and for us to maintain our tax rate. Right now, my taxes, the way I have it calculated mentally, it's going to be, by 2026, we'll be paying almost $10,000 in property tax for our modest home, and that is completely unacceptable. Thank you.
Ian, thank you. I appreciate this, and I appreciate this question because it's something that we hear regularly, and I'm gonna dispel what I'd call a bit of a myth. The reality is we don't have the highest property taxes in the province. We're in Southern Ontario. There's a really great study, and I'll admit I don't know what Zoo Casa is, but there is a really good study that's done every year. It's called the BMA study. I know that I have been studying the BMA study intently for the last 10 years, ever since I took over as budget chair, because the reality is we do have a higher mill rate in St. Catharines than a lot of other parts of the province, and our average taxes are on the higher side, and I don't think anybody would deny that. The idea, I've heard people say we're the highest, we're the 6th highest. I don't know what measure they're making that by. I can't find a measurement where we would be in that situation. I don't think that's the case at all. But our property taxes are a little bit higher, and they are on the higher end. There's a couple of very good reasons for that, and I think it's important for the community to understand. And this is something we're running into. This is maybe, from my perspective, one of the most worrying things for our community is we're an old community. 2026, we have aligned in the budget to celebrate our 150th anniversary. There's infrastructure in this city that's as old as the city. And other municipalities, the Bramptons of the world, the Mississaugas of the world, they have largely been built out over the last 50 years. So their challenges are very different from our challenges. Additionally, we're a city that is built out to its urban boundary. So where other communities have much easier development patterns, they can just put up tract housing and sprawl, and they can bring in new property taxes and new assessment value. We don't have that option. We're built out to our urban boundaries. So we have challenges that other communities don't. Now, I will say very clearly, I don't think that is licensed to raise taxes, but I think we have to understand that that's a challenge the community has. This is part of the reason why we're pushing those higher density developments in the downtown core, why we've been talking about, redeveloping parking lots, which currently really don't give us any sort of revenue, with high density housing units, at shopping malls. Those are opportunities for us to increase the overall assessed value of the community, increase the tax revenue without really impacting the services too much, without impacting the state of being for the community. So I appreciate the question. For no other reason, I wanted to address the fact that is not true. I know sometimes there are things that feel like they're true, and I respect that, and I understand people get frustrated with their property tax. The last thing I will say, and I always like to point this out, when it comes to every dollar that we in St. Catharines spend on taxes, the city only receives 4 cents of that dollar. The region receives 4 cents of that dollar. Education, I think, gets 2 cents, and then the other 90 cents are split between the federal and provincial governments. So only 4% of your taxes that you pay in a year, GST, PSD, or I guess HST now, fuel taxes, income tax, and property tax, only 4 cents comes to the city. And we're responsible for 2/3 of the infrastructure. So I just want to put that last point in because I do appreciate the question, and I'm happy to expand with anybody whenever I have an opportunity to chat with them.
Thank you for the question, Ian. Robert, you had a question about the budget process. What's your question, Robert?
Yes, thank you. I guess I'm a little confused about what exactly is going on with the budget, because I appreciate that you might want to do a 3-year forecast for a budget, but it seems the way that it's phrased is that it is simply a 3-year budget period, not a forecast, and yet there is a necessity apparently under the so-called new strong mayor protocols for the mayor to table a budget every year. So I'm wondering how that is, how do those two things reconcile? I guess I'd also like, as an additional comment, I'd like to see, I like the strategic plan as far as I can tell for the city so far, and other things coming up, the way you're projecting and your vision and whatnot. But I'd like to see sort of things with regards to the budget summarized more. Like I looked at the website, and I saw a bunch of things there, all the information's there, but I don't really see a good summary of where things are going. So anyway, there we go.
Thank you for that excellent question, Robert. The 3-year budget, the multi-year budget, is not necessarily due to the strong mayor powers. It was something that was decided before then, and I certainly supported, based on my private sector experience, that it's always good to be forecasting, as you said, several years in advance. In fact, in the private sector, I used to do 10 years. But to answer your question, there is a 3-year budget, but the mayor gets to present or table this year's budget, and then there is a forecast for the next 2 years. But our staff has developed a policy about that multi-year budget that identifies how those next 2 years budgets will be handled. So each of those has to be confirmed or reconfirmed the following year. So it's not set in stone. Hopefully it's pretty close to what it's going to be, but it will have to be debated and confirmed each year. And there could be changes, and there could be macroeconomic changes that make us change certain direction on the budget. But the other point is, when you have multiple years, it does give some certainty to the taxpayers in terms of what to expect and what services to be provided and so on. But they will be reconfirmed every year.
And Robert, I'll just jump in just very quickly on your last point about budget summaries. That's something we're going to take back, and we're going to put something together that'll be up on the website as soon as we can get it there with respect to some summarization. I think that's a good thing. It's something maybe we'll task our communications department with to put together some summaries that maybe are a little bit easier for people to digest before they dive into the numbers. Because I know there's some folks, they want that summary first before they get into the actual meat of the budget. So that's appreciated, and we will work on putting something together for that.
Thanks for that question, Robert. We are just about at the end of the telephone town hall. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question at the end, you will be able to leave a voice message with any questions or comments about the city's budget. Before the questions are left, though, Mayor Cisco and Councillor Garcia, I'll ask you each to take one last opportunity to leave a comment, starting with you, Mayor.
Carl, I really want to thank you first and foremost for coming out and for doing this. It could be a bit yeoman's duty, so it's appreciated. And I want to thank everybody on the call. We had, a couple thousand people on the call tonight, which is always great for us. The feedback and the questions are really important. This year uniquely, I will say, people always say, oh, well, is it too late in the process? It's definitely not. Like, my budget and what I'm putting together coming out of my office in conjunction with my council colleagues and our budget chair, Councillor Garcia, is also going to be informed by what we heard tonight and what we're hearing in our open houses. So I appreciate everybody who jumped on the call. Whether you asked a question or not, thank you for being a part of it tonight. And thank you for those who stayed on and listened. Thank you for doing that. The feedback is important. Councilor Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would also like to thank everybody who participated and remind them to please let us know if you didn't get on the call. You can give us your comments by leaving a message, and you can visit stcatharines.ca/budget and fill out our budget engagement survey, or you can send us an email to budget@stcatharines.ca. And again, a reminder that the city is hosting various in-person budget engagement opportunities. We had an open house yesterday, as I mentioned, and the mayor mentioned, and there's another one, 6 to 7 p.m. at the Kiwanis Aquatic Center, and that's open to the public. If anybody would like to attend that wanted to talk to us and didn't get a chance tonight. There are also those pop-up budget kiosks that we mentioned earlier happening across the city, at the Penn Center, at St. Catharines Farmer Market here next to City Hall, at Fairview Mall, and at the Central Public Library. And again, stcatharines.ca/budget for days and times. We appreciate your input and questions very much, and thank you to staff for being here supporting us. Have a great evening, and don't forget that budget and council meetings are available for the public to view. They're streamed live on the city's YouTube channel, and residents are welcome to submit correspondence or delegation requests regarding items on the council agenda.
Have a wonderful night, folks.